So we're going to talk about brands, we're going to talk about people, we're going to talk about purpose, and we're going to talk about meaning, and in this sort of order. We're looking at brands like Converse. Converse, weirdly enough, owned by Nike. I don't know if you knew that. It is owned by Nike. Talking about segmentation, why do Converse own, why did Nike own Converse? Because Converse occupies a part of the world where Nike couldn't necessarily go. If you think about where Converse goes, it's street culture, it's kind of rock style, it's kind of a bit, it's playing guitars more than playing tennis, you could say. And it's the all-American kind of a baseball brand, you know, Chuck Taylors and so on, and basketball as well. And it's got a street vibe to it. So Nike, cleverly, what they did was, you know what, we'll just buy you. We'll own that segment. We're not going to monkey around with you at all. You carry on doing what you're doing. We use all our facilities and our capabilities to do what you want to do. But there you go, where you go. And it's a big fashion brand too. So we're going to be looking at brands themselves, how they intersect with culture, how they intersect with people, and how people express themselves through brands. This is a woven version of this Nike Converse Chuck Taylors. And what that means, what it signifies to people, Mark was asking me about theories of brand, schools of thought that have shaped my brand thinking, and I couldn't really put my finger on many, to be honest. I've read a few books, like Malcolm Gladwell's books. I don't know if you're familiar with Malcolm Gladwell, great author, very easy to read, wrote books like Tipping Point, Blink, those sorts of books, really good books. And they're inspiring. So if there's a core thought that's gone through everything I've done, I guess it's inspiring. So I'll talk about that. These are the three areas that, if you read the blurb on the websites about what I'm meant to be talking about tonight, this is what I'm meant to be talking about. So I'm keeping these as a navigation for myself. How a business can understand their market segments and bring them alive. That's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to show you an example of something I did with that. How businesses can understand and define their purpose, know what's great about them, and develop their brand. This is, again, something I did, again, with the Nike brand. It's a real case study, if you like, and it was a real problem that brand faced that I was lucky enough to be part of helping them solve. And I've used that approach ever since in pretty much all the brand work I do. And similarly, and lastly, sorry, discuss how to turn that understanding into an effective target marketing strategy. And again, I'll talk about some examples, some work I've worked on, some projects I've worked on. Guinness will be one of them. We'll be talking about Guinness and others. And how, for me, it all goes back to a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose, a sense of mission. This is the filter through which all of that goes through. And this is kind of a little bit of a... When Steve Jobs said something really interesting, he said, it's only when you look back at where you've been can you join the dots. So these are sort of the dots. When I look back and I start looking at all the weird dots in my previous millennia, I'm a Time Lord, actually. I'm about 400 years old. So I had all this kind of experience. So I was really into football, soccer. Sorry, folks. Football, World Cup stuff. From the UK, I would be. When I was a kid, loved it. Wanted to play for England, like all kids do in England, maybe. I don't know. And then I got into the music, got into the Beatles, got into all sorts of, started getting into a band, all that kind of stuff. Biology, I was telling you, my biology teacher, I was fascinated to do that. And I got into teaching because the rest of the band was still graduating. While I graduated, I became a teacher. And then I became a PE teacher and a biology teacher, and then it ultimately went from mainstream and sort of supply teaching, substitute teaching, which is like 60% riot control, 40% teaching, into special needs teaching, which is actually really, really fulfilling and brilliant teaching. So I went to that, taught music, technology and stuff there, and it was great. And then got in the band. It was the 80s, okay? So picture the scene. No, don't, because it's horrible. No, it was the 80s, so it was the old, really slick, flat top Grace Jones style haircuts. And my brother, who was the main songwriter and the genius front man of the band, he had a bit like FA Cup ears, FA Cup big football trophy in England. His ears were a bit like this. So all the band photos were a bit kind of rubbish, And I was going out with someone who was doing fashion at the time, and she said to my brother, she said, "Hey, if you had your ears pinned back, you could be a model." So he thought, well, you know what, the photo's looking a bit rough, maybe I'll put them there. So he pinned them back. And photos were genius, fantastic, off we went. And he was in Brown's in South Molton Street, a groovy fashion store in London one day, and someone taps him on the shoulder and says, "Hey, ever thought of being a model?" That night he was in a fashion set, off he went. So via him, the reason I tell the story, I got kind of married into fashion. I met my first wife in the fashion world and got embroiled in the fashion world, fashion production. We did the music for the fashion shows. Our respective wives did the kind of catwalky stuff. In fact, Ken did the catwalk stuff as well. His name's Ken. Australian name, pretty good actually, isn't it really? And I'm Errol. There's a song about me, I believe, in Australian crawl, right? No, yeah, anyway. Different Errol. Anyway, I digress. And I guess the picture I'm trying to paint here is that various influences have got me to where I am now, to thinking about the way I think about brands and people and the world and how the various things connect, and businesses. So after a kind of imploding time in fashion, I spun out back into teaching, then did an MBA, then did get into business, Tom Peters. Found that Tom Peters' favourite UK company happened to be a company called Imagination. Imagination is a really interesting creative company. There's one here in Australia, and in fact they do the fireworks on the bridges New Year's Eve. First non-Australian company, I believe, to do that, apparently so. But I worked in the London bunch, and they were really massive at the time in the 80s specifically. They had all of Ford's motor shows all around the world. That's what they do, and they still do them. And the 80s, being tons of cash around, and motor show stands are enormous. They have everything going on in those stands. They have architecture, they have signage, they have websites, they have theatre, they have jugglers, they have everything. You name it, it's on there. So they had all the creative toys in the toy box. So they were creating brand experiences. The thinking at the time was, big respect ad agencies, you have the big budgets, you look after the brand, we're not touching your broadcast strategy, but brands, businesses, you need a broadcast strategy and you need an experience strategy. We'll do all your experiences. They can do the brand, they can do the broadcast, we're not touching that. We're going to get, so fantastic, great. And at the time, the company, Imagination, had the whole of the Millennium Dome to do at the time in England, which was fantastic because coming along as a strategist, I was the first planner on the phone list apparently. So the idea was that most design companies, you can usually tell when you point to a bit of work out in the world, you say, "Oh, that work there looks a bit like that design company. That feels like that. That feels like that company's done that." You can almost sometimes you can spot the creative director's influence or the kind of the house style turning up. Now that's not doing the companies any good. That's doing the agency more good than the companies. So hence the need for a strategist to say, well, you may like that font, you may like that film, you may like those groovy graphics. However, for this brand, for this context, for this world, this brand's all about this. And for these consumers, they're all about that. So to make that connect, we need to talk in these terms, not necessarily those terms, but if you want to use those, talk like this, hence the need of a strategist. That was my role to do that. So it was fantastic. I got to work on experiences, and we're going to talk about a couple of them now. And I think that's extrapolated forward right to now. What has happened in the 80s and the 90s, of course, dominance of the advertising world still applied. And there was this notional line. I don't know if anybody works with agencies, creative agencies. There's above the line and there's below the line. Anyone familiar with that term? Does that ring a bell with anybody? So apparently there's a line somewhere. I don't know where this line is, but if you find it, let us know. But there's above the line and below the line. It's rooted in something like printing or something. I don't know what it is. But that was the then, but this is now. Pre-digital, in the world's BF before Facebook, in the years back then, you could do a great big event and you could do something amazing in some sort of stunt somewhere. And what would you get? A few column inches of PR. You might get some groovy people think, hey, that was cool. Could you measure it? Not really. Did it cost a lot? Yes, a bucket load. So when you talk to a marketing director or any brand owner that says, well, should I invest 200 grand in that great big piece of theatre you're suggesting? No, I'm going to stick it more on brand channel. I'm going to buy some more telly. I'm going to buy some more stuff that I know I can measure. Fast forward to brands like Nike, who recognized that when I went to join that creative agency, Wieden & Kennedy, named the agency, one of the best agencies in the world, amazing agency, fantastic culture, worldwide network they have. They're one of the only independent creative agencies of that ilk, of that scale, stature still going. Whenever there was a brief coming from Nike, Nike would always say, look, we know you can do the great big Super Bowl ads, we know you can do the fantastic £1 million bond numbers, but we want something non-traditional. Give us something non-traditional, give us something interesting, give us something a bit more kind of, you know, that's going to create more of a buzz, something different as well. Ultimately, Nike got to do that, and Wieden & Kennedy got to do that, and latterly you could say with campaigns like the Old Spice campaign, you know, the man could smell like campaign, that was done by the Wieden & Kennedy agency I used to work in Portland. And arguably, you could say that was a brilliant example of, and you know how it worked, it was a great piece of content, it was a great piece of film, but the genius of it was Twitter, was the way it went on the internet. They were reacting in real time to internet posts by people responding to and making films about it. It went wildfire using that kind of context. So, ideas became something interesting. I worked with a media company that came up with TV ideas using research, and then I had a family, got 4 girls, and they're all here in Australia and having a great time. 2 of them play football. I coach one of them play football. And moved from ads, doing Nike stuff, to ads over here, and do some bits of innovation. I work for an insights company as well. So that's the filter that all this is getting shown through. So long story about that. So excuse that. Let's crack into it. How business can understand their market segments and bring them to life, bring them alive. Well, 3 little words. When I think about people, 3 little words come to mind. And of course, there are various 3 little words. It might be mum and dad. But when we look at segments, this is what we do. We go, you know, who are these people? What are these people? They're mum and dad. But I would suggest the more fruitful way to do it, I've found, in my experience, is to think about them in full colour. Most segmentation studies tend to be a bit reductive. They tend to reduce. They tend to pull things down. And I would suggest we need to go against that, push back against that kind of microizing of people, and realise that in a segment of population, even in the Roy Morgan segments, yes, we all acknowledge they're okay, they're a bit blunt, because when if you take a demographic segment, we're all very different. We're all very, very different within that segment from time to time, depending on circumstances. The antecedent stuff was a great example of that. So push back and think about full colour. And if it is full colour, let's remember this. I'm a big fan of people, so I get a bit kind of esoteric with my quotes, so forgive me for that. So this is an interesting one. We are not human beings having a spiritual existence. We are spiritual beings having a human existence. Now, if you think about the world we're in, think about the pressures we're in, the cultural pressures we're in, the societal pressures we're in. It's interesting to note that actually, maybe we are spiritual people with spiritual things, but just having this human existence. There's a movement back towards, or a hankering for, humanity in a world where actually a lot of that's being pushed out. There's a lot of dehumanity going on, or dehumanizing going on. So let's remember that. And I found connecting to people, this sort of thought has always been very helpful to me, at least. So rather than think of them in a little box, which is what we tend to do, we try and micro in on people, and sometimes we actually cut them in half. We say, well, let's think about him, let's think about her, and let's try and get some facts on them. No, I would suggest go the other way. Let's go back, let's go full colour, let's get ethnographic about it, let's get back to sociology. There's a great piece of research, surveys. There's sort of 2 approaches to surveys, and Erin's not here, are you? You're not here, Erin? No. Will have remembered me talking about research, because she used to work in research. There's many and thin. You can do 1,000 people survey, and that's a big kind of thin thing, or you can do a few very deep. There's a great company called IDEO, on the planet. IDEO create amazing things, and their approach to research to make Nokia's new phone or Apple's first mouse was going to do 12 deep ethnographies. We're going to take 12 people and go deep on their lives. We're going to live their lives, live with them, get the nuances of them, and from that understanding, we can then create insights about what to do. Close to people is what we need to do. So think about them in full colour. Let's think about their whole environment. The 3 little words could be, I love you. Sadly, most marketing says, I target you. And we use that metaphor. We use the militaristic, ballistic, physics metaphors of projectiles still in marketing. It was what we've grown up with. No doubt it's the post-war, it's the kind of the very white male, you know, it's the way it is. And then even worse still, we retarget you. You know, it's kind of, I don't know about you, but I hate retargeting. I think it's just ridiculous. You know, what does it make me feel about a brand that's stalking me? Do you still want that kind of bag you kind of you were sort of interested in that maybe like, no, I've moved on from the bag I was sort of interested in last time. And it wasn't even me, that was my kid on the computer looking for bags. You know, anyway. So it's so blunt as to be unhelpful. People don't care about brands as well. I've attended millions of focus groups, I won't say millions, exaggerate. Maybe I'm a Time Lord, so maybe I'd have done millions of focus groups. No. I've attended focus groups. I've watched Nestle look at muesli bar, people looking through muesli bar packaging. I've attended Panadol stuff. And they don't give a monkeys. I don't know, has anyone here been a part of a focus group? Has anyone attended any market research? Exactly, you go, what are they on? All the ads are rubbish. When I was doing the lectures I used to lecture at the Communications Council, and I used to say to the group, what's your favourite ads? And they go, tumbleweed moment. Complete. Even, we're in the industry, we don't even like the ads, so it's ridiculous. You know, it's ridiculous. People that could care less about brands, they've got enough on their plate. So, interesting thought, all of us, care about what we're driven by, our beliefs. So if you think about it, when I used to teach used to teach in special needs, and as I said, came across a book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Blind and partially sighted people, kids with visual impairment, they were. As part of that theory or approach, there was a core thought that our beliefs, what we believe, create our attitude to something. So if we believe something, that will give us an attitude about something. And if we have that attitude, we will value certain things and not other things. If we believe women are as good as men, in fact women are better than men, that will give us attitudes to certain things in our culture. That means we'll value certain things differently to other things. When I was a teacher at this school, a kid fell over in the playground. It was a special needs school. And being from the mass mainstream comprehensive school system as a kid and as a teacher, I was a bit right on, a bit left, and kind of a bit socialist. And I said, hey, what's our HIV policy? There wasn't one. There wasn't a HIV policy in the school. These are special needs kids. These are, there's some autistic kids. There's all sorts of problems we have here. But we need this HIV policy. Where's the equal opportunities policy? Well, we haven't got one. So I became head of equal opportunities at the school. So I'm a big fan of just getting things equal. Attitudes, beliefs. If a brand can help, fantastic. If you can help me out, that's great. But otherwise, I don't care. I really don't care. So brands need to get over themselves. But of course, from the other side of the fence, we're preoccupied with this thing. How do we appeal? What do we have to do? How do we get through to these people? Really important. How do we do it? So we ask questions. Well, my suggestion is say hello, go meet them, and start decoding. Understand why we matter. Understand why. What motivates them? Why do you do that? Why are you buying that? Or why is that interesting to you? And then why should they care about what you do as a brand? What do you represent in the world that they should actually give a monkeys about? Then a couple of core thoughts. I'm a big fan of empathy. I think empathy is a big thing. If I was to write a book, it would be about brand empathy or something like that. And if you look at the definition, maybe that's an idea. I'll make a note of that. No. If you look at the definition of empathy, it is to be in feeling with. And it's interesting, I love you, right? I'm in love with you. You are with somebody, you're in love. To be in feeling with someone. It's not understanding them. It's not being sympathetic to them. Oh, I'm sorry about that. It's really tough. It's actually being in feeling, getting in feeling with that person. That is showing empathy. You need to get in feeling with that person. Listening with the eyes. The Habits talks about listening with the eyes for feeling. You know, it's classic therapist stuff. You know, I went to an interview once for a company called Interbrand. Anyone heard of a company called Interbrand? They do the super brands things. And the person who's interviewing me said, oh, and she looked at my CV and said, oh, you're a brand therapist. I thought, okay, fair enough. That's interesting. So listening with the eyes and ears, and listening more than you're talking. You know, a classic old adage, if you've got two ears and one mouth, if you use them in that proportion, you won't go far wrong. But why? What's the why? Why should this person care about what we do for a living? Why do we matter? Why do they create? And then decode. When I worked at a media company, they put us through a course of semiotics. Anyone here done semiotics? Anyone familiar with semiotics or what it is? Okay, so semiotics it's the study of meaning. It's looking at something and trying to decode what it means. Fonts are real good examples of that. In fact, I brought along a shower cap packet from the hotel. And fonts are great because they tell you a lot. They try and communicate things. This is a sans serif font. You know, it hasn't got any font. It hasn't got any edges on it. So it's meant to be a very approachable font, a very egalitarian, democratic, you know, everyone's equal kind of font. If you imagine the front cover of Vogue, right, or The Economist, those great big serifs on the serif font, which means they are telling you this was made in a foundry, there's a king involved somewhere on the line, this is really important, you know, it matters. You've got to be really brainy to read this, not many pictures, you know, this is, you know, that kind of stuff. So serif fonts are all about communicating that, and sans serif, that. And there are other bits of semiotics, meaning, signs, symbols, words. Think about the words we associate with the theme of beauty. Dove was an amazing brand that started rethinking that in terms of what that might mean, or how it might mean how we talk about energy, for example, in maybe China, or how we talk about, I don't know, fulfillment in the CBD, or fulfillment in the country, the different languages, different image sets. Now, I was asked when I was out in America by Nike, say, hey, we need a point of view on the consumer. We need a point of view. The board of Nike, you need a point of view on the consumer. So can you do that? And so fine, that was my job. Off I went and did this. So I made this little film. I'll show you this little film now. So that was just one example of so the job was bring the audience to life. And that was one approach to it. So if we're thinking about how do brands do it, some brands will say, and here's a big poster of the consumer, or here's a kind of pen portrait, here's a PowerPoint deck. Or for Nike, it was the board. It had to be quick, it had to be fast, it had to be 2 minutes and done. So a film was a good idea. And
How long ago did you make that?
when do you think? 2002.
So 15 years ago.
But yeah, Nicholas Negroponte, that was the quote. Nicholas Negroponte said, attention will be the scarcest resource of the 21st century. He's the guy who founded MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He's a guy who wrote, I think he wrote a very important book on, I think it was called Clicking, I'm not sure where that quote comes from. And that sort of caught my mind. The thought was, my understanding of the consumer at that time was, you know what, there's stuff going on, these people sample. So I wrote the thing, sat with an editor, cobbled together a load of old ads, chopped a few up, there's a Levi's ad in there, there's loads of old Nike ads, made a little film, bingo, off it went. And it created a kind of, a point of view. And point of view is a phrase that I've pretty much found repeating itself throughout my career with brands. What's our point of view? When you walk down the halls of Nike, in Beaverton or anywhere, when you bump into someone and they say, what's our point of view in our women's business? What's our point of view? You're supposed to be able to say, passion in action. That's what we're about. We're about passion in action. Ah, right, passion in action. I can design kit for that. I can create stuff for that. That's a good directional thought for me to take that in a particular area. Football, soccer. What's our point of view on soccer? It's brilliant football. Brilliant football. Ah, right, that's why it's Holland and it's Brazil and it's skill and it's flair. It's not play to win or anything like that. No, that's probably Adidas or somebody else. We're about brilliant football. Okay, right, got it. So point of view is really important. Sampling. Loyalty. Well, you know, what are people loyal to? They'll only be loyal to things that are inspiring to them, things that are mattering to them. And I'll show you another film now in a second. It's a blur out there means what people want, what brands need to give, and what consumers need to find in brands is, there's some guidance here. You've clarified the choice process for me. It's classic brand thinking 101, but that's what they do. They give guidance. Mixing things up is good, breaking conventions is good, making new possibilities is good. And these are universal themes I've found. From 2002, I'd argue to 1982 to 1962 to 2142, whatever it is. And it's a universal truth. So what I've found successful at all, if there's been anything, has been to try and find something that's universal, that relates to anybody that this brand can connect to. If you think about it, those people who do shop the Apple store, there are 5-year-olds to 55-year-olds, all going in for different reasons, but they like it for their own reasons. It all resonates to them. There's something that brand represents. Maybe it's freedom, maybe it's creativity, maybe it's a sense of possibility that everybody universally relates to, which is something I like. And if you can find that, that's a bit of a nirvana in a brand situation. I'm going to play you another film now, and this is something that when you say Nike. When I first mentioned Nike in the context of doing talks or anything, people go, "Hate that brand, arrogant Americans. Really just don't like them." Because when you think that swoosh, that is populated with associations. Every person in this room has different associations with that brand. Clearly, I've been lucky to have certain associations. You've been lucky to have different associations. We all have our associations with all the brands we've mentioned. And this is Nike's mission statement. Our mission, it says, to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. There's an asterisk on the athlete, and underneath it says, of the asterisk, if you have a body, you're an athlete. So if you have a body, you're an athlete. So this is Nike's mission statement. And they're going to see a film now featuring a few people. Toby Hatfield, the inventor the designer of the Air Force Ones, a legendary Nike designer, designed many of the shoes we've all probably worn, I wouldn't be surprised, at one stage in our lives. You'll be hearing I'll mention a guy called Mark Parker, currently the CEO of Nike, an ex-designer at Nike. And this is a project it speaks for itself. It's about it's called the Nike Fly Ease project. You may be familiar with it. I'm going to play the film to you, and we'll talk about it in a second.
Sometimes we really have to be inward facing and really reflecting on the things that make us passionate. We do such a great job helping athletes perform better and faster and jump higher and all that kind of stuff. But what about perform better just in the sense of quality of life? When we say, if you have a body, you're an athlete, that means everybody. The idea of a shoe for an easier entry and exit came to me from Mark Parker when he received a call from our first employee, Jeff Johnson, who unfortunately had a stroke. His left side was pretty functional, his right side was pretty non-functional. Mark called me up and said, hey, Toby, we need to help him. I started thinking about doors on a hinge. When you open it, it's literally like a hinge door, and then literally you just close the door. Jeff, pretty much almost in the next breath, he said, hey, this isn't just about me. This is about all the other parts of the population that could truly benefit. That's what launched us into how can we do this beyond doing it just for Jeff. There was this letter that was put on the social media addressed specifically to Mark Parker.
Dear Mr. Parker, my name is Matthew Walzer. I am a high school student and will be a junior at Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida.
Matthew in his letter said, you know, in a couple years, Mr. Parker, I'm going to be going to college, and I really don't want to have my parents there to tie my shoes for me.
Cerebral palsy stiffens the muscles in the body. As a result, I have flexibility in only one of my hands, which makes it impossible for me to tie my shoes. Bill Bowerman said it best, if you have a body, you are an athlete.
I mean, he understood why we do and what we do, but he was just asking.
I wanted to say, look, this is a real issue. These are daily challenges that millions of disabled people face. You know, can you guys help me out?
I think this is what we're supposed to do. Matthew was looking really for a basketball style. He really loved basketball. He loved LeBron James. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna take this zipper in the back so that this could literally just peel open. The main thing was about him getting in the shoes, adjusting the shoes, closing the shoes, and then be able to get out of those shoes all by himself. And we gave it to him.
I'll never forget that night, taking them out of the box and putting them on. I just felt this wave of independence that I never got to experience before.
So we've been working with Matthew from September 2012. He's right up there with some of the best. I can't say it's really any different than what I've done with a Tiger Woods or a Maria Sharapova or a Michael Johnson. You know, apart from the fact that we're thousands of miles apart, I'm still getting the same kind of information. It's been a great back and forth, but what I knew I was gonna need to get to was the fact that I was gonna need to see him in the shoes. So I think what this has done for us is it brought it into sight. It brought it into our vision.
Oh, hi. Oh, my gosh.
Now what we need to do is we need to broaden that vision.
So nice to meet you.
Give me a hug, man. It's led to what's going to be released to the public in the Zoom Soldier 8 Fly Ease. Fly Ease is a cutting-edge wraparound zipper system that makes getting into a shoe much easier for those who have trouble with their hands.
He inspired us at Nike to be able to bring something special for the masses.
So we wanted to present you the very, very first pair of those before anybody else.
I think it's an unbelievable story, and I'm very honored and very blessed that my shoe is part of the whole project. The inspiration that he gave us is gonna last for a lifetime.
Wants to meet you.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's up?
Oh my.
What's going on,
What's
buddy?
up?
How you doing?
Good.
You can stay right there, man.
Good?
You can stay right there.
At some point, some people become less able sooner than others.
Oh, thank you,
Yeah,
LeBron.
no, you're awesome, man.
But eventually, we all become less able. Because again, it's not just about stroke victims, it's not just about cerebral palsy, it's about all of it. And thus, the FlyEase technology.
What do you think of that? Well, so, gets me every time I see that. Anyway, purpose. Bless you. A brand showing it can do something for people. And when looking at that film, a few things jump out of that for me, certainly. Daily challenges. We understand and care. The brand shows it understands, and it shows it cares. It's about showing, it's about doing. Can you help me out? It's a simple call. All people are asking for is, can you help out? I think it talks very well to Nike's specific policy in terms of creating products. They design for elite athletes. And they know, unless they, if the moment they stop designing for elite athletes or for elite the problems they're solving, then their product will become largely irrelevant. It's because they can do that that we like their products, we like their brand. He was just asking, sometimes we have to be really inward facing and reflecting on the things that make us passionate. My work with brands certainly has been about, well, what's great about you? What's fantastic about you and what you're doing? What are you passionate about? Let's find some uniqueness and magic in that. Let's find where that can be positioned in the world and how that can communicate with the world and be relevant to the world, and then let's start behaving in doing that thing. Brought into sight, into our vision. This kid just brought it into our sight, into our vision. Now we need to broaden that vision. So we're seeing that as well. What are your passions? Oh, I'm a passionate microbrewer. I love beer. I want to do it right. Great. Let's do that and broaden it to the world. Brands being bought, microbreweries being brought up. T2. Anyone a fan of T2? Right. Started small, bought up by Unilever. Carmen's started small, bought up by whoever. And it's about all of it. It's about all of it. It's not just about your thing. It's a wider vista than the thing you make. So the classic approach, maybe you can't see that, sorry that. That asterisk means a lot. If you have a body, you're an athlete. There's a classic tone there. There's a inspiration, innovation for everybody, and it means a lot. So when you ask, certainly when I work with brands, I say, well, you want that product, why is that good? Or you want that idea, why is that good? Well, it helps me do this. Well, why is that good? Well, it helps me do that. Well, why is that good? Because it helps me actually do this. So it's digging deeper to find the deeper why. And that's where you find the magic. Because we do not see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. This is green for a reason, it's just reminded me. When I was teaching, I was a science teacher at this school for the kids with visual impairment, and I was teaching photosynthesis one day, as you do, and so I was going and say, right, okay, so the sun's up there, and there's this leaves, and the sun shines down the leaves. There's this green stuff in the leaves, and it's called chlorophyll. And his hand goes up, and the hand says, "Sir, what's green?" I didn't know where to start. What's green? So we think we know what consumers want. We read a bit of data and we think, oh yeah, they want that, yeah, they said they want that, they said they want this, they want, yeah, sure, that's what it says. Do a survey, that's what it did back in the 60s, do a survey, absolutely, do a survey. But do we really know? Let's not assume we know. We have to get close to them. Talking of Nike, I'll talk you about a popular culture thing. There's the idea of me, there's the idea of you, and there's the idea of us. Looking at popular culture, the context brands sit in is important. Looking at the language, looking at the imagery, decoding things, looking at the signs and the symbols, classic semiotics. Myth is interesting. I use myth when I help brands reposition themselves or position themselves. The idea is that classically in the world falls, it's another part of semiotics apparently, the world falls into normal things and mythic things. The example being, is there's metal and there's water, there's kind of water and there's runny and there's solid, right? So metal that is solid, did I say solid over here? Maybe. A solid metal that is solid, that's normal. Metal that is runny, that's weird, that is. What's that? That's mercury. Whoa, what the heck's that? That's two things, there's two opposites in one thing. How can that be? Well, that's what? And of course we're human. And then water, normally, runny. But if you find solid water, ice, There's a certain cachet to it. There's a cultural wow to it. Humans have they're drawn to it. There's a hairs on the back of the neck thing to it. It's even in our cultural language. It's got a kind of cachet, it's kind of a stuff to it. So if you as a brand can reconcile two opposites in a category, the cool thing is, guess what? There's old technology, new technology, easy and difficult technology. Old technology that's easy, was this easy? Okay, riding a bike, screw top lids, piece of cake. New technology that's super difficult, flying rocket ships to the stars, flying planes, operating X-ray spectrographs, whatever. If you find old technology that's difficult, like sheep shearing, or I use lock gates or bell ringing or great big wooden roundabouts, there's a weirdness, there's an allure, there's a wow to it. If you find new technology that's easy, Apple, there's a wow to it. How can that be? Where's the iPad? Oh, the 8-year-old's got it. What do you mean the 8-year-old's got it? Where's the manual? There's no manual. What do you mean there's no manual? There's got to be a manual. It's a new piece of kit. Where's the manual? No, they're off. They're doing it. We've all had that experience. And of course, if you can own a position that's mythic, what it does is it depositions the opposition, depositions your competition to be perceived as very normal, very boring. They have to compete in very copyable features. The example I use is Apple have an iPod. Microsoft had a Zune. Anyone got a Zune? Anyone bought a Zune? Right, okay. Bill Gates had a Zune, right? And there's a picture of Bill Gates holding a Zune way back when the iPod came out. And of course, it's 100 times a machine. It probably makes tea and all sorts of things. Nobody cares though, or cared, because it was like, oh, it had to be hard. There'd be a shift in backslash thing involved. There'd be some log-on problem. It'd be nonsense. So it's important to do this. The story I want to tell you about Nike was a great film I saw about getting out there, getting connected with the world. They wanted to understand training shoe culture. And there was a film about Air Force Ones. I think it was some anniversary or other. And they went down to basketball courts in New York or wherever it was and asked people to bring along their shoes and talk about why they were so important and stuff. And people brought them and they, in their boxes, all pristine and new. So why are they so important? Because one of the guys said, well, in this part of the world, you walk up to somebody and say, hey, how you doing like that? You're going to get stabbed. You're going to get attacked. You do not look people in the eye around here. That's not what you do. What you do is you go up to people and go, yeah, how you doing? Yeah, check it out. And you check out the shoes. You go down there and you check the shoes. And they check your shoes. And if it's all respect, yeah, good, then you can have a conversation. Now, you would never get that from a survey. You would never get that unless you went there and got into and started decoding. So get out there, get involved in culture. Popular culture tells us things about things. Symbolism. The symbolism involved here. This is a modern young woman carrying some sort of great big ancient martial art decorated in some tribal way staff thing. It's not a lightsaber. So this is a more modern approach, a more enlightened approach to aggressive. We were Tom Cruise, we were Bourne Identity, we were Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, that male Knights of the Round Jedi. And there's our modern day Jiminy Cricket, who's a bit of a silly but helpful. And of course, the enemy is the hard, angular, anti-soft. You can go there, you can go with that. How businesses can understand and define their purpose. I'm going to speed up a little bit because I think I'm running out of time. Am I? How long have I got left now? All right, good. I'll move faster. That's no good. I'm on number 2, 15 minutes. All right. How can businesses understand, define their purpose? So I'm going to blitz through this. Does anyone here have an iPad and draw on it with an app called, what's it called? I've forgotten it now. No, it's Paper. There you go, Paper. There's an app called Paper, which actually makes your iPad act like paper, and you draw on it like it's paper. It doesn't. You don't cut and paste, because you can't cut and paste on paper. And the same company, 53.com, it was like the app of the year a few years ago. It's genius, it's fantastic, it's beautiful. They made a stylus, and of course they called it Pencil, because it's a pencil. And it's based on a carpenter's pencil. You can get it in wood or wood, and it has a rubber on one end, and it has a stylus on the other end. It has no buttons. And it recognizes when you're holding it. If you're holding it upside down, it turns into rubber mode. If you are leaning on your iPad, it recognizes that, oh, someone's leaning on the iPad, I won't write or make a great big smudge there. It behaves exactly like a pencil. That's all they wanted to do. So get to your purpose. Their purpose is, let's create something that is like a pencil. That's all it is. We're not going to widget it up. We're not going to get feature creep all over it. We're not going to be a BlackBerry. We're not going to make it make tea. No, none of that stuff. It's not going to calculate calendars, event, nothing. It's just going to be a pencil, and there we go. So, inspired by that, brands and purpose. Richard Branson. Brands that thrive in the coming years are going to be the ones that have a purpose beyond profit. Now, there's a kind of a blurring with mission and vision and those sorts of terms, and purpose and that sort of stuff. Mission to me is very straightforward. Nike's mission statement is a great one. What do you want to be remembered for? What's your mission here? I want to be remembered for bringing inspiration and innovation to every athlete and reminding the people in the world that if you have a body, you're an athlete. That's what I want, my epitaph. That's my mission, the thing to achieve. My mission, military speaking, is to take that hill. That's what we need to do. We need to get that hill. Simple mission, very clear. Vision is about, you know, what do we want? What's our vision of a successful future? You know, there's classic ones like an Apple on every desk or a Microsoft Windows on every desk. Purpose is kind of a bit of a fluffy term, purpose. So I'm not over comfortable with purpose, but you know, purpose is something. The purpose of a brand is to make money, surely, right? That's kind of what it is. So you could get tangled up in the semantics of it. But in my approach to when I do work with brands, I have a workshop, which is what I did for Nike, which answers 3 questions. What do we like? What matters to us? What makes us special? Because the context was they had a particular product, Nike Shocks. You know those springy shocks things, those Nike springy shocks things. They had a product that they believed was really important. They thought the future of running is in this product of ours. We believe this is a really serious technology. The ads at the time were trading on the gimmick, the spring. So people running across the screen going boing, 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 running back, going boing, 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 running back, going, and the end line was boing. So when someone bumps into someone in the halls of Nike and someone says, what's our point of view on shocks? Boing, maybe? Boing? I don't know. What is it? Didn't have one. It was, we need a point of view on shocks. Can you figure out a point of view on shocks? So I thought, right, I need to have a process that gets past this thinking. I call it a get yourself out of the way yourself process. The understanding was, you know this stuff. Just stop thinking. Let all that intuitive, deeply held truth come out, and let's see what we got. And then when we get there, let's think about how that looks compared to our rational brain. So this is the process I designed, and it's a very simple process. It uses various bits of theory, but it takes on the notion of what business are you in. Branson says, we're not in the airline business, we're in the entertainment business at 30,000 feet. So when you go, oh, wow, that makes a lot of sense. They're in the entertainment, no wonder everyone else feels so starchy and boring and kind of, you know. So think about what business are we in. This is part of the thing that I do with folk on the workshop. You know, if you're in the music shop, you're in the finding yourself business, really. You don't sell musical instruments. You're in the helping people find themselves business. Or maybe you're in the escape business. Maybe you're in the self-enlightenment. Maybe you're in the popular enlightenment, I can be a minstrel, because that's what music was about, telling stories that would enlighten people, because people needed to know around the campfires what the king was doing. If you're in the jewellery business, maybe you're in the symbols of I love you business. You're not shifting tin, you're not shifting bits of diamond, you know. This is what you're in the business of. Wow, I didn't realise that. Yeah. I was working with L.J. Hooker maybe about a year ago. You know, real estate, what do you do? We said buy and sell houses. That's the business we're in, right? No, well, why is that? Why is that good? Well, because, you know, you sell someone's house, that means they can put a kid through college and then off they go. And then, oh, right, so did a bit of a kind of a montage thing, which is the what matters to us bit. And it's like, what's that image there? Why did you pick that one? Oh, it's about hope. You know, people give, you know, hope is what we sort of give. Wow, interesting. So you're not in the business of selling houses, you're in the business of making people's dreams come true. You make dreams happen. Yeah, that's what we do. Bloody hell. Geez, we do that. Yeah, that's what you do. The airline, entertainment business, 30,000 feet. Coffee shop. Why are you in the coffee business? Well, I'm a here's to a great day business. Hey, this is going to be a great day. Go for it business. That's what we're here for. And you'll go to that shop again. You won't go to that shop round the corner. It's just, yeah, what do you want? Yeah, good and nice. Fashion. The this is me business, the expression business. You're helping people express themselves. You're not, decorating. You're about attitude. And as I say, it's about hope. They buy a benefit, they buy a hope. The job of a brand, in my view, again, just might be my view, but I know it's shared by a number of people. A guy I used to work with, particularly Mike Byrne, who's a creative director at a great agency in New York, says that brands need to represent hope. They need to be the best hope you can be for something. A bank needs to be the best hope someone can have to see their dream come true. So you're about hope. Also, in this approach, I love this quote completely. Stop looking at the competition. Comparing yourself with the competition steals joy out of everything, instantly. You just nuke the joy by comparing yourself, by doing any comparing. It's the classic, hey, kid comes to you with a great drawing. Hey, Dad, look what I've done. Oh, great, yeah, it's fantastic. It's a bit like that one over there. But if you did it, like, look at this, you've killed it. So don't compare. Avoid comparison. And get tactile with things. This is using multiple intelligences. There's a theory in education, Howard Gardner, education professor from Harvard, he talks about multiple intelligences. There's a great story, The School for Animals. I don't know if you ever heard The School for Animals. Look that one up. It's a kind of an interesting story about the parable of an animal's going to school, and of course the lion hated swimming, and of course the squirrel really was rubbish at flying lessons. Thanks. And the valedictorian at the school was this strange mutant lizard that had gills and could, you get my meaning. So the idea is that most academia, apparently we've all got a profile of intelligences. We've got kinesthetic intelligence, visual intelligence, auditory intelligence, all sorts of intelligences. But most academia focuses on two, logical, linguistic. Hence the kid that's good with his or her hands tends to fail. The chatterbox, good interpersonal intelligence, tends to be pushed aside. The dreamer staring out the window, intrapersonal intelligence, tends to be thought of as an idiot. But this process uses different intelligences. We also think about discovering things, getting directions on things, deciding on things. There's a thought from the word decide comes from the Greek, I think, or maybe Latin, decidere, which means to kill other options. So again, because we're grown-ups, if I showed you what are these four brands, which is your favourite, you'd go, not that one, not that one, that one, that one, this one. Because you instantly go, not. Jerry Garcia, Grateful Dead, guitarist, he said something very interesting. You don't want to be known as the best of the best. You want to be known as the only one who does what you do. Tiffany, this is what we do. Respect you guys. You carry on doing what we do. We're Tiffany. We do this. There's jewelry and there's Tiffany. Apple, yeah, whatever. Cacon, PC World, whatever. We do this. Woody Allen, 80% of success is turning up. So we've got to turn up. Psychologically, physically, emotionally, whatever it might be. To get there, you've got to be there. Turn up. Ultimately, out of this thing, you get inspiration, guidance, and ambition. So this is my approach to things. I think that it's important in a process to get at perception opportunities, the brand essence, values, all these things come out of a process. And you get things like this, and it just coalesces into so what for this particular project we're working on. Lastly, discuss how to turn that understanding into an effective target marketing strategy. So here's the effective marketing strategy. This brand, Starbucks, right? You'll recognise this brand. Not very good in Australia because we like coffee in Australia. Australians like coffee. And other parts of the world, they like Starbucks because that represents great coffee. Great segmentation.
With that brand, what does it represent to you?
Starbucks, that's all.
Simple? Like there's no hidden meaning behind it? Or?
Well, the symbol, I don't know what the symbol is. It's some sort of mermaidy type thing. It used to have, it's a new logo of Starbucks. I don't know. I don't know where it came from. I think it's something to do with Seattle, possibly. I'm not so sure. I don't know what the actual provenance is. But again, good point. I haven't got a clue. My associations are Starbucks used to have some words around it. I can't remember what they are now. Can you remember what the words are around it now? Starbucks coffee or something like that. Why have they lost the words? They don't need them. They either don't need them and they don't want to be associated with coffee. What's Starbucks positioning? They realise that there's work and there's home and there's what they call the third place. They wanted to be the third place that people had. So that was their strategy. And at Starbucks, you have a coffee whilst thumbing through a few kind of blues CDs, or maybe kind of, you know, sitting on comfy, reading papers and hanging out with buddies, or having a meet, local kind of friends meet, whatever. So they realised that we're selling Starbucksness. We're not selling coffee, we're selling Starbucksness. Apple, when Steve Jobs released the iPod, the other big news after that big piece of news was we're now dropping the word computer off our name. We're no longer called Apple Computer, we're called Apple. So you could almost sense the kind of ripple around the room going, hang on a minute, what do we sell then? You sell Appleness. That's what we sell Appleness. Yeah, we do. And people come and buy stuff and things and they hang out and yeah. It's not a computer company. So everything communicates. This logo communicates buckets, semiotics. Tells us a lot. It's approachable, it's green, it's kind of got heritage, it's got all sorts of things. To different people, it means different things. But everything communicates. And it's all about talk value. All of it ladders to talk value, in my view. So my approach to brands is create talk value. Get people talking in a positive way. NPS, Net Promoter Score, we've all heard of those three little words, lovely nice three little words. Net Promoter Score, does anyone know what that means? Does anyone not know Net Promoter Score? We're not familiar? Well, for those who aren't, Net Promoter Score means those surveys we answer to Telstra, would you stay on the line for a quick 3-minute survey? Would you be likely to, would you think that having experienced what you did, would you recommend this to a friend of yours? Yes, I would recommend that on a scale of 1 to 5. Would you recommend? I'd recommend a 4. Or actually, no, I wouldn't. That'd be a 2. So those little surveys, they take the promoters and they take away the detractors, the people who wouldn't promote, the number, take the numbers away, and that gives them a score. They divide it by the people who didn't care less, or something like that. They come up with a factor, and there's a score. Everyone gets a score. Banks are big on Net Promoter Score. There's an ENPS, Employee Net Promoter Score as well. So it's all about talk value. Guinness. I want to show you this pebble. I'm going to throw this around the room. This is a ticket to get into the Guinness storehouse in Dublin. I'm going to throw it around there. And I was a strategist on this. Marshall McLuhan's also famous for saying that the media is the message. He's also less famous for saying this. Everyone experiences far more than he, she understands. Yet it's experience, not understanding, that influences behaviour. It's experience, not understanding, that influences behaviour. Johan Cruyff, a favourite hero of mine from the 70s, football. Create experiences, that's the big message, create experiences. Nike football. When I was there at Nike, we launched football into Latin America, took Nike into football. So, Christ, so what do we do? How do we go and do that? We went and found out what went on the ground in football in Latin America, which came up with inspirational ideas like, because this ball's about accuracy, let's put a ball in the corner of a building, but all the posters will say, it's foot person kicking a ball, but it will say, top right-hand corner, 465 Via del Campo. That's all it will say. 7 miles down the street, there'll be a ball on the top. It's about accuracy, it's about flair, it's about brilliant football. It brings it to life. But it's inspired by theatre. Christo, artist Christo, wraps islands in silk. This is a great big, these are islands, I can't remember where now, wrapped in silk. He wraps buildings in silk. Amazing stuff. So with that thought in mind, with this sort of thought in mind, with sort of appealing to the intelligences, let's create theatre, let's create talk value. The pebble is a ticket you get to the Guinness storehouse in Dublin. It's the Guinness brewery. There's a little white strip on the back of that ticket, on that pebble, which after your procession around the storehouse, there's a pint-shaped atrium in the middle of the storehouse with a gravity bar at the top. You give the bar person your pebble, they take the strip off, pour you a pint of Guinness, give you your pebble back, give you a pint of Guinness back, and you're drinking Guinness at the top of the Guinness storehouse, top of this great big pint, looking at 360-degree views of Dublin. Brand experience. I argue all the time whenever I do anything like this or talk out or bring that pebble anywhere, I carry it around with me all the time because I love it, it's great. That's got to be one of the biggest return on marketing investments on the planet, that lump of plastic right there. Imagine how much that cost. Nothing, pennies. And it's, whenever I talk about the Guinness, someone says, oh yeah, I've been there as well, I've got my pebble. You've got your pebble? Yeah, I've got my pebble. You got your pebble? Fantastic. Right, and it's about the essence of the brand. What's the essence of the brand? Let's bring it to life. And that's really the kind of the doctrine of it. What's the essence of the brand? Let's bring it to life in experience, in stuff. Stuff. Colours magazine. Anyone read Colours magazine? Heard of Colours magazine? Seen Colours magazine? It's a kind of a staple of most creative studios. It's a kind of a bi-monthly French and English picture magazine. Big themes. It will talk about war 2 months, and then it'll be food, or it might be about health, something like that. You wouldn't notice it, but if you look at the small print, brought to you by Benetton. Talk values, content. Apple do it all the time. Great talk value. Their ads are legendary. The talk value, they're good. Lonely Girl 15. Anyone heard of Lonely Girl 15? So when MySpace was around, do you remember what MySpace? Way back when the web was powered by elastic bands or whatever it was. Lonely Girl 15 was this great big, massive blogger. You know, really, suddenly she was everywhere. She was kind of big news. That's right, she was a complete fake. She was some actress, I think, it's a New Zealand actress in LA pretending to be this kind of, oh, life's so tough and I'm horrible, I'm having a hard time. But there's a theory, I read a paper on it, an article on it, about accidental influentials. It's about influence. And she wasn't that influential. She's not particularly influential, but it's about the forest fire. It says the strength of the forest fire has nothing much to do with the size of the spark that created it, but more to do with the state of the forest. So when you're thinking about brand behavior, thinking about a tightly stretched drum skin that resonates your message across. Old Spice using the internet, Twitter, to disseminate a great piece of content. And it's all about content. I'm getting to the end of this now, and fundamentally it wraps up like this. If it's anything for me, it's about turning up, as I say, it's about empathy, it's about being directional. Trust, be inventive. Get to trust you know about your business and you know what made you want to do that, and find that, articulate that in a powerful and unique way, and then be valuable with it. Guy Kawasaki, when he was Apple's famous chief evangelist, used to work with Steve Jobs, he said one of the biggest things he learned from Steve Jobs is you need to create things that are unique and valuable. That's it. Unique and valuable. That's where you want to be. That's where the iPod is. And lastly, learn from the greats, talk value and wow. Tom Peters mentioned earlier, it was all about customer wow. I'm going to play you one last thing, if I may, just one last thing. Talking of Steve Jobs, I just wanted to play this and then...
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them, but the only thing you can't do is ignore them. Because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
So a classic piece of advertising. That's me. Thank you very much. Hope that was interesting.